In this video, I'm going to show you how to do resource management using Microsoft Project. If you'd like to master how to use Microsoft Project and go from beginner to pro, then you can download my free cheat sheet at alvinthepm.com/project guide. If we're just meeting for the very first time, my name's Alvin. I'm an engineering project manager here to help you advance your career in project management. As we get into this, what questions do you have about using Microsoft Project? I encourage you to ask any questions you have in the comment section below and to join the conversation. So in Microsoft Project, there are 3 types of resources when you're creating and managing a project. You have work resources, material resources, and cost resources. It's really only 3 that you need to know. That's right, the triple threat. A lot of this might sound like mumbo jumbo talk, but trust me, once you understand what this all means, resource management in Microsoft Project is actually kind of easy. In Microsoft Project, you assign a work resource to either a person or an equipment that's performing the work. And you'll assign these work resources to the task in your project so you can see the resource capacity or how much that person or equipment is being used. So let's say that you have a project manager and an engineer in your project. Both of these people are team members and they would be assigned as work resources to the different tasks in your project, like developing the project plan or performing validation studies and tests. If you had equipment like a testing machine, a saw, or a lathe, for example, then this equipment would be assigned to the specific tasks that they're being used on, like testing samples or cutting and preparing materials. A material resource, that's a consumable item that's used when the task is performed. Now, unlike a work resource, a material resource is consumed as the project task is being completed. So for example, you could have raw materials like concrete, steel, or wood, or you could have supplies like office supplies, paperwork, or any other items. So whenever you need to track how many items are being used and the cost of the materials being consumed throughout your entire project, then you should assign material resources. For example, assigning the material resource of concrete to a task of pouring the foundation for a construction project. Does that make sense? And the third resource type is what's known as a cost resource. This is a fixed cost that is associated with a task. Unlike work resources or material resources like we talked about earlier, with a cost resource, you only need to track the costs, not the time or the quantities of material associated with it. You use cost resources to track one-time expenses or fixed costs that are associated with the task. So examples could be cost of a license, a permit, or equipment rentals. So if you were managing a construction project, you'd assign a cost resource for a permit to have a cost of $500. This permit cost resource would then be assigned to a task like preparing the site. To show you how to perform resource management in Microsoft Project, we're going to use this sample project plan that I created for the launch of a charity event. I'm currently in entry mode using the Gantt chart screen. I've split up all the tasks among 6 phases. So we have project initiation and planning, budgeting and fundraising, procurement of materials, marketing and promotion, logistics and coordination, and event execution. You'll notice that I also included milestones at the end of each phase, with the project starting on January 21 and the final charity event to be kicked off at the end of March on Monday, March 24. Let's quickly go through the tasks so you can get an idea of the plan before we dive into resource management. Pro tip, as you go through each task, I want you to start thinking through each task and about what kinds of resources would you apply to each task. In the first phase of initiation and planning, this is where we're defining the project's vision. We're brainstorming where we're going to hold the charity event location. The second phase is about determining the budget. So we're figuring out where How are we going to fundraise and get the sponsorships that we need? The third phase is all about procuring the materials by working with vendors or suppliers. In our fourth phase, we're developing our marketing plan. We're designing the branding and implementing the marketing campaigns. For the fifth phase of our project, we'll coordinate with our venue to set up the charity event, and then we'll also secure any permits, insurance, and lastly, finalize the floor plans and seating arrangements. And in our last phase, that's when we're finally executing the charity event. So this includes managing the staff, overseeing the flow of all the activities, coordinating with the vendors, and checking in on the attendees. And if we scroll to the right, we can see our Gantt chart with the diamonds, which represent our milestones. A few tasks, they are taking place in parallel with the culmination of the charity event taking place on March 24. Now let's talk about the resources that we might assign to our project. For our team, let's say that we have 5 groups of employees on our team to launch the charity. First, a project manager who will manage the entire project. Second, a marketing coordinator who will oversee all the marketing efforts and fundraising strategies. Third, a vendor manager who will negotiate contracts with our vendors, procure the materials we need, and secure the location of our charity event. Fourth is a graphic designer who will design all the branding and promotional materials. And lastly, a group of volunteers for helping us out on the day of the actual event. In terms of materials, we'll probably need decorations, event signage, and printed flyers. For other miscellaneous items, we'll need to pay rent for the physical venue, perhaps even rent out audio and visual equipment, obtain event permits, insurance, and a catered food service. So this is the list of all the resources that we need to make our charity project a success. Before I show you the easy way to set up these resources in Microsoft Project, do me a favor and smash that like button if you're getting value out of this video so far. First, you'll need to switch your screens to resource sheet mode. To do that, move your mouse to the left-hand panel. Right-click, and in the drop-down menu, choose the option for resource sheet. The first resources that we'll add will fall under the work resource type because we're assigning employees who will work on an hourly basis for this project. The first person we'll add is our project manager. In the third column for group, this is the category name you give to your resources, so you can sort your resources later on. So for our work resources, since these will be employees in our company, let's call this employee. The next column is for maximum units, which all it means is the maximum capacity or the number of units that a resource is available during a specific time period. So if someone is assigned a maximum of 100%, then he or she is 100% dedicated to our project. But if he or she is assigned a maximum of 50%, then they're only working on the project 50% of the time. I know, we all wish that everyone worked on a project 100% of the time, but unfortunately, it's not always the case. And Michael Scott from The Office would probably agree with me. Luckily for us, with our project manager, let's say that he's dedicated 100% of the time. The next column is for standard rate, which is the rate of pay for regular, non-overtime work. In other words, what is the cost associated per hour for that person to work? With our project manager, let's say that he's paid an hourly standard rate of $50 per hour. And for his overtime hourly rate, let's say that it increases to $75 per hour. The next column is for cost per use. Now personally, I don't usually use this column. I rarely use it actually. Cost per use is the fixed cost to use a material resource. So think of it like a flat fee that's charged to use the material, regardless of how much time is spent working on that task. So that could be a one-time fee to use an equipment, a delivery fee for a service, or a contract change. In our example, since a project manager is a work resource type, a cost per use doesn't apply here. The next column is for accrue, which looks at when the money is being spent. In Microsoft Project, you can set this to one of three options. You have prorated, start, and end. Prorated means that the money is being spent as the hours are being worked on the task at hand. So for example, if you have someone who works for you on a continuous basis, prorated makes the most sense. If you specify start as the accrual, then money is paid in advance with an upfront payment before work starts for that task. But if you specify end as the accrual, the money is spent at the very end after the work is completed. So with that said, for our project manager, let's say that we'll pay him on a prorated basis. Now let's go ahead and add 4 other work resources to our project. We have marketing coordinator, vendor manager, graphic designer, and volunteers. Similar to our project manager, we'll label them as employees in the groups column. For the column for maximum units, let's assign 100% to the marketing coordinator, vendor manager, and the graphic designer. But for the volunteers, let's say that we have 3 volunteers who can help us out with our project. So we'll assign 300% to the volunteers. For standard hourly rates, let's say that the marketing coordinator, the vendor manager, and the graphic designer are assigned a flat rate of $40, while the volunteers have a standard hourly rate of $20. In terms of overtime, let's say that the marketing coordinator, the vendor manager, and the graphic designer have overtime rates of $60 per hour. And the volunteers' overtime rate does not change from their standard rate, so we'll leave the standard rate the same in this column. And lastly, let's say that they're all being paid as prorated. So now we've added all the employees who are work resources assigned to our project. The next group of resources to add are the material resources. So we'll add here decorations, event signage, and printed flyers, and we'll classify them as a material type. In the column for material, this is where we type in how the material is being measured in terms of units. So this could be square feet, pounds, cubic inches, and so on. It's up to your discretion to define what your material units are. To make things straightforward for our example, our materials are kind of unique, so we'll describe them in other types of units. For decorations, let's say that the unit is items. For event signage, let's say that the unit is signs. And for printed flyers, let's say that the unit is flyers. We're simplifying things here since this is kind of what makes the most sense. There's really no need to complicate things if you don't have to. Under the column for group, let's classify all these materials as items. Let's go ahead and fill out the standard rates to purchase quantity 1 of each item. Let's say that it costs $1.50 for one decoration, $20 for a sign, and $3 for a printed flyer. And in terms of when we would pay the fee for each material, let's say that it would be expensed at the beginning when work starts. So accrual would be defined as start. The next group of resources to add to our project are for cost resources. We'll add here the following: venue rent, audio visual equipment rentals, event permits, event insurance, and catered food service. We need the food if we want to keep our people happy, am I right? We don't want them to be hangry. Know what I'm saying? So to group these cost resources, let's categorize venue rent, permits, and insurance as associated with the event, and the audio visual equipment rental and the catered food service to be associated with a vendor. Since these are cost resources, we won't need to fill out the columns for material, maximum units, standard or overtime rates, and cost per use. For cost accrual, let's say that we'll pay for all these services at the very end. So now this is what your final resource table should look like, with the resource names, resource types, the material label, maximum units, the hourly rates for standard and overtime, cost per use if it's applicable for you, and accruing the costs. To assign the resources to your task in the project, there is one way that is the easiest way. It's as easy as ABC 1, 2, 3. Let me show you how to do that. First, let's switch back to Gantt chart mode. Then move your mouse to the top ribbon and click on the tab for resource. Inside the panel for assignments, click on the button for assign resources. You'll see this new pop-up window where it lists the resources that you created, the units, and the costs. I love using this because you can click on different tasks inside Microsoft Project. You can immediately see what resource is assigned to it as well as the costs. So let's go ahead, let's start assigning our resources, and we'll start with our employees group. As best practice, if you know that a resource will be fully dedicated to working on your project, it's so much easier to assign that resource to a heading in the project. So for our example, click on the project header task for launch of a charity event. We know that the project manager will work on and oversee all of the tasks. In our assign resources window, click on the project manager resource and type in 100% for its units. And Microsoft Project will automatically calculate the cost based on what we inputted into the resource sheet from earlier. In this example, the cost for the project manager will be $18,000. If you want to do a quick math check, it's $50 per hour, which is our assigned standard rate for the project manager. Multiply that by 8 hours in a day, multiplied by 45 days, which is the total estimated length of our project. So if you do the math, it equals $18,000. So yeah, Microsoft Project correctly calculated the resource cost here. With Microsoft Project, you can assign one person to multiple tasks at the same time. So let's be efficient here. Left click and drag your mouse to select all the tasks that you want to assign to that person. So we're highlighting identify and hire vendors, negotiate contracts with vendors, procure materials, and secure catering and food. In the assign resources window, click on vendor manager and type in 100% in the column for units and press enter. And right away, you'll see that the resource has been assigned to these tasks. Let's also assign vendor manager to the task for coordinating with the venue to set up with 100% units. For our marketing coordinator, we'll assign her to multiple tasks at once. We'll left click on one task to select it, and then we'll press the control button to select multiple tasks. So let's assign marketing coordinator to create fundraising strategy, obtain sponsorships, develop marketing plan, and implement marketing campaigns. And we'll type in 100% for units here. The next employee to assign is our graphic designer, who will only work on one task for designing the branding. Our volunteers will be assigned to the tasks for setting up event signage, overseeing the event flow, coordinating with vendors, and facilitating guest registration and check-in. Let's go ahead. Let's assign our material resources for decorations, event signage, and printed flyers to the relevant tasks. Decorations and event signage materials will be assigned to the task for procure materials. For our example, let's say that we'll be ordering 100 units of the decorations and 30 units of the event signage. So under decorations and in the units column, we'll type in 100. And after you press assign, Microsoft Project automatically calculates the cost for all 100 items. So it's 100 multiplied by $1.50 for each decoration, which equals $150. We'll also order 30 signs, which leads to a total cost of $600 for all the signs. Our next material resource for printed flyers will be assigned to the task for implement marketing campaigns. We'll order 500 of these flyers, which leads to a total cost of $1,500. The next group of resources to assign costs to all the tasks which are related to our cost resources: venue rent, audio visual equipment, event permits and insurance, and catered food and drinks. So for event permits and insurance, we'll obtain both of these in the task for secure event permits and insurance. Let's say that the cost for our event permit is $500 and the event insurance costs $2,000. So we'll type in both numbers into the cost column for these tasks in the Assign Resources window. After you press Assign, you'll see that these resources have auto-populated in the table with its expected cost in brackets. Pro tip, for your cost resources, you can split up how you pay off expenses into different tasks. For example, if you're paying the down payment for a service when you first assign the contract, you can pay the remaining amount after the service is completed. I'll show you how to do this with our remaining cost resources. For venue rent, let's say that the total rent for the day costs $5,000 and we have to pay a 25% down payment when we sign the contract with the vendor. So 25% of $5,000 is $1,250, and we'll pay this amount for our task of negotiating contracts with vendors. The remaining amount of $3,750 is what we'll pay after we finalize all the logistics and we coordinate with the vendors. So we'll assign that expense to our task for pay remaining amount to vendors, and we'll type into the cost column $3,750 for the resource of venue rent. For audio visual equipment, let's say that the total cost to rent out the equipment is $2,000 and we have to pay a 50% down payment when we sign the contract. So similar to venue rent, we'll assign this 50% down payment to the task for negotiating contracts with vendors, and we'll expense out $1,000 here. The remaining $1,000 will be expensed with a task for pay remaining amount to vendors, as I'm showing on the screen here. And for our catered food and drinks, let's say that the total payment is $3,000 for the service, and we have to pay a 25% down payment after we sign the purchase order with the vendor. So in our schedule, this payment would correspond to the task for secure catering and food, and we'll pay the 25% down payment here for a cost of $750. The remaining amount to pay our food vendor is $2,250, which we'll pay in the task for pay remaining amount to vendors. So with our example, you can see that we're paying the remaining amount to our vendors in this task. Now, if we scroll through our project plan, you'll notice that we have this red person indicator for several of our tasks. If you look at these two tasks, create fundraising strategy and obtain sponsorships, it looks like our marketing coordinator is working on both tasks at the same time. Hence why it's showing that there's an issue of resource over allocation. Question for you: how would you resolve this resource over allocation of the marketing coordinator with these two overlapping tasks? What would you do? Leave me a comment down below with what you would do and why. Join the conversation, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts. Now, if you want to learn how to update your project's progress in Microsoft Project, please watch this video next, and I'll see you in the next video.